Hey everyone, this is Sean and you are watching a video entitled Labels on My Pagan Channel. Alright, to start out with, I'm going to tell you guys how I label myself with my religious beliefs. I label myself as solitary, eclectic, shamanic, pagan. I'll get into the breakdown of how that fits all together later on in the video, but that's just something I wanted to put out to you guys. Now, immediately, when I say that how I label myself, when I told you how I label myself, that gave you a general idea of what my personal beliefs were, if I'm not mistaken, correct? So that's what labels are meant to do. Labels are meant to start being more along the lines of a jumping point for someone when they ask about your own personal beliefs and how you express your spiritual self. Labels don't define a whole part of you, they only define just a small part of you that isn't the entire story, but just a beginning of a story. Whereas, like I said in my first video, my religion is only just a small part of who I am. That's another thing with labels. Labels only just describe a small part of who I am. I believe I'm funny, am I not? My friends who watch this probably do think I am funny, and if not, then obviously I'm not funny to them. But anyway, I think I'm not too bad looking, so I would say that I'm a little bit handsome. Just feeding my ego a little bit. I haven't had my self-esteem for breakfast this morning. I label myself as being tall in confidence, not in stature. I'm really only 5'8", but that's average height, but I feel tall because I feel like I am tall. It's mostly a confidence thing, but again, I think I'm getting off track with this. Like I said before, labels only describe a small part of the person entirely. Now, going back to how I label myself as a solitary, eclectic, shamanic, pagan. Solitary is really simple. I work alone. I don't work with a group. I don't work with a coven. Because one, it's geographically unavailable for me, and two, because I don't really feel like I need to. But I would like to do maybe group work on Sabbaths, just to celebrate the Sabbaths with a group as opposed to alone, which I have kind of been doing for a little while. Really just want to celebrate with other people. But I digress. Eclectic meaning that I pull from different paths, different faiths, such as my personal belief in karma, where whatever you put out to the universe, that energy comes back to you. Kind of like the same thing with spellcraft, whatever energy that you put out in a spell comes back to you. I also believe in the Wiccan rule of 3, but in a different sense, whereas instead of whatever you put out comes back to you threefold, I believe whatever energy you put out into the universe affects you on a mental, physical, and a spiritual level. That's how I believe in Wiccan. Those are just a few examples of my personal beliefs and how I pull from different religious teachings. On top of that, another way that I would describe the eclectic part of me is that I don't just worship a single pantheon of gods. I pay homage to Greek and Roman, Celtic, and Norse gods as well. I do sometimes work with them, but mostly I work with the Egyptian pantheon because that's who I feel called to work with most at this time. But again, I don't just honor a single pantheon. Shamanic being that I work more with a spiritual plane of existence as opposed to doing spellcraft. What I mean by working with the spiritual plane of existence more is that I believe that the way that shamans did, where it is you go into a meditative state, you project your consciousness onto the spiritual plane of existence, and from there you can work with the spirits or your deities to influence the physical world, in a sense, or influence your personal self. That's what I mean by shamanic in my own personal practice. I work in a more personal way on a different plane of existence through a meditative state in my practice. Now, with the word pagan, the definition of pagan is anyone who does not follow the three Abrahamic faiths, which are Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Now, I was born into a Christian family. I did follow Christianity for most of my life because that was what I was taught that I had to follow. But when I was 10, like I've said in my first video, I started to research other faiths on my own because that's what I felt called to do. So, I used to label myself as Christian because that's who I was at that point in time. But ever since I was 10, I started to think about how I label myself. And as I got older, I finally started to realize that I identified more with paganism and Wicca and New Age ideas than I did with Christianity, because it was something that I felt called to, as opposed to being a Christian. I felt more like being a pagan, and that's what drew me to become a pagan, and that's what drew me to begin to label myself as a pagan. The big question, though, is whether or not to use labels. My answer to that question is do what feels right for you. You shouldn't feel pressured to use labels, because labels, again, just define a part of you. If you feel like you shouldn't use labels to define your religious beliefs, then don't. But if you do feel called to use labels to define your religious beliefs, then make sure that you use labels that you feel called to use, or what feels right to you, and make sure that those labels, if they carry a negative connotation, people start thinking, oh, that's bad, that's evil. Be prepared to defend yourself on your religious beliefs, but not in a more defensive way. Just make sure that you tell that person, no, that's just a negative connotation that comes along with that word, what it really is, and then continue on to explain what that word really means. That's just one way to deal with how labels can affect you in your own life. But I might do a video on how to deal with negative connotations that come with being a pagan or a Wiccan or a witch practitioner or any of those non-Abrahamic faiths. I might do a video on how to deal with that. But that's a video for another time. Right now we're talking about labels. So, pretty much that's all I have to say on this topic. That's really all I needed to say. This video is probably the shortest one that I've ever posted. So, I'm working on making them shorter. I know that sometimes you guys don't really want to watch 15 minutes of a person's babble sometimes. So, whether it's morning or night, wherever you are, I wish you all many blessings. Blessed be. I will try to post up another video next weekend. Maybe get started on that psychic series that I was talking about in the previous video. Alright, blessed be.